fiscal policy actions involving government spending. In the economy, there is a circular flow of income and spending. Everything is connected. Money that is earned flows from one person to another, and most of it gets spent again. Not just once, but many times. What this means is that small increases in spending from consumers, investments, or the government lead to much larger increase in the economic output. So I read two great articles, one from the New York Times called Putting a Number of Federal Education Spending, and another article from Bloomberg called Throw More Money at Education. So I got a lot of information from these two articles and how education affects interest rates, real GDP, and how it shifts aggregate demand. So in this article, I found out that in 2015, government spent $1 trillion on education, and from 2014 to 2015, it increased by $5 billion. So we were giving the MPC, which equaled 0.93. So I figured out how the increase in government spending of $5 billion would change real GDP, considering the spending multiplier and the crowding out effect, when, of course, the MPC equals 0.93. So for each dollar increase in spending leads to a $14.29 increase in total demand, as proven right here by this equation. If the government spends $5 billion, total demand increases by $71.45 billion, as proven by this equation. Now as we go down here to the money market, we can see how when government spends money on education, the resulting increase of income raises the demand for money from MD1 to MD2. And this causes the equilibrium interest rate to rise from R1 to R2. So we can see the change from equilibrium from here to here, which increases the interest rate. So a cause of the interest rate could be done by the crowding out effect. So the multiplier effect seems to suggest that when the government spends $5 billion on education, the resulting expansion in aggregate demand does not necessarily have to be larger than $5 billion. But yet another effect works in the opposite direction. While an increase in government purchases stimulates the aggregate demand for goods and services, it also causes interest rate to rise, which reduces investment spending and puts downward pressure on aggregate demand. This reduction of aggregate demand that results when the fiscal expansion raises the interest rate is called the crowding out effect, which we will see the crowding out effect right over here in this graph. So we can see that the initial impact of the increase of government spending in education shifts the aggregate demand curve from AD1 to AD2. Yet because the interest rate is a cost of borrowing, the increase in the interest rate tends to reduce the quantity of goods and services demanded, particularly for investment goods. This crowding out of investment partially offsets the impact of the fiscal expansion on aggregate demand. And in the end, the aggregate demand curve shifts only to AD3, which changes the real GDP, which it increased and then now goes back to 83, right over here. So, as obviously, the aggregate demand curve, the money demand curve will shift to the right because the demand for money increased by 74.45 billion, which result in increase in interest rates, which is known as the crowding out effect, as we just mentioned. And this is my works cited on the articles and a little bit more information about government spending and education.